Ladies and gentlemen, the play's the thing. With your host, Judy Sleed. Special guest, Howard John Lebwith, East Hampton activist and world-famed runner. Now here's Judy.
Well, here I am again.
And I'm not Cary Grant.
Hello, everybody. I have a wonderful playmate today. Howard, shall we tell everybody about our secret rendezvous?
Yes,
on
well,
Wednesdays?
there are people in this town that you meet at dumps, at the dump.
Yes.
There's a certain cadre of people who do. You and I, for some reason, are drawn together at supermarkets, and it doesn't matter where it is. Yes. Supermarkets in Montauk, in Sag Harbor, anywhere. Yes. I say, and there you are. There's yes. Judy. I said, well, you know, I thought maybe you had a sideline, a job somewhere along the line, but it's not. You're there for some reason. You just appear yes. miraculously.
Right. So, shall we say that we met at the supermarket? That
well,
would
I think we should talk briefly about the fact that you and I both are on involved with a wonderful group called Ellen's Run.
Yes.
And in my case, you're the general factotum and pixie and everything involved with it, all right? And everybody loves you. And I'm the race director, and I've been the race director for 15 years, all right?
Yes.
I got to be the race director because the first year they had it. They decided to have it, and I'm a runner, or sort of a runner anyway, and I saw big, wonderful signs that said Ellen's Run, and they had the beautiful logos of the E and the running L's, you know, in this.
And did you know right away what it was for?
Well, it seemed good, and it seemed like a nice race. It was going to be at the high school, and I was still practicing at the time. I was a dentist, and I was practicing in East Hampton. And so I planned, it was supposed to go off at 9 o'clock. Mm-hmm. And what I did is I planned to run the race and then quickly get to my office because I had patients at 10 o'clock. So anyway, what happens, I got to the place and they call us out, and all the runners are there, and we're waiting. And for some reason, they thought that was the time to make speeches. They brought the supervisor in about it, and it kept going, one speech after another, all right? Mm-hmm. And it's getting close to 9:30 until there was a young man next to me, all right, who's really aggravated about the whole thing. And he said, if you don't start this effing race, soon my age group is going to change. All right? And that was it. So anyway, we ran the race, and I got through with it, and there was a well-known, at that time, a runner, Bert Konslick, who was a well-known runner in town. And I said to her, it was 5 kilometers, which is 3.1 miles. I said, that wasn't 3.1 miles. And what happened is they had hired a guy, and he had mismeasured the race, and it was barely 3 miles at that point. So the next year, they made some money at it, but they really wanted to increase the amount of money for this. I mean, Ellen's Run is a wonderful cause because breast cancer is the second most prevalent cancer in the United States at this time. So what happens is they brought in a woman who basically, Linda Shapiro, who is I would say she's like the Pearl Mester of this area. She really begins to bring sponsors and things. So they brought her in, thought maybe they could do it. And they felt at that time they couldn't afford her. And I was her race guy. I mean, because I had been the race director for about 80 races. So I knew something about racing. So I went with this, and we met in this beautiful house, which was Julie Ratner's house. Julie is the brains and the heart of Ellen's Run. I mean, there are 2 sisters that are involved, and they both work hard at it, but Julie is really the wonderful, wonderful heart of the race and the cause. And we met at this beautiful house and sitting around, and what happened is they decided not to use Linda at that time. Linda since has helped a great deal in Ellen's Run, but at that time decided not to use her. And it was such a wonderful group of women there. Many of them were survivors, and the cause was so good. I said, these people need help. So I stayed on as race director.
And I was so lucky you stayed on, because when I joined, I couldn't find a house, and I kept I kept phoning you, and you gave me directions.
How to get to the place. Yeah, that's it.
And when
That's
I
great.
finally arrived, everybody stood up and applauded. But it was credit to you, because you told me how to get
Well,
there.
but as I said, it is, I mean, it's really encouraging, because first of all, it's now in her different home, and it's around the table, and it's mainly women, all right?
You mean Julie lived in a different house at
She
first?
lived in a different house then.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, on Tyson Lane.
Oh,
It was
whatever
beautiful,
that is.
with an orchard and the whole thing, you know, and then she and her husband split, and it's a long story. We won't go into that. But what happens now, we sit around, and, you know, at one time, it's mainly women that are there. I mean, there were many times I'm the only man
Yeah,
that's
well,
there.
they had a few guys. They just didn't come back.
Well, you know, at one time, about 5 years ago, they passed a resolution. They made me an honorary woman, and which is, I think, is a tremendous honor. So they made me an
Well,
honorary.
I don't think we mentioned that Julie, when it's called Ellen's Run, she was Julie's sister.
Yes, yes.
And they just had
Lee,
their-
and Lee also. I mean, Lee is the other sister. It's two sisters that
Yeah,
really
the other
decide.
sister, but like you said, Julie is the main participant.
Well, she's here, and you know, they're
they just had the 16th year.
16, yeah, sweet 16. And
It
I've
was
been
a
race director
tremendous,
for 15 years.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's really, the experience is just wonderful. But what I wanted to talk to you about, babe, is when I was graduated from high school, a friend and I bought a hearse. And what we did is we decided to take the summer off, and we drove all around the United States in this hearse. And there were a lot of stories about that, which I will not relate.
I can imagine.
All right, anyway. But what happened is I saw a great deal of the United States.
Yeah.
You know, and I was impressed by the people in the United States. I mean,
Yeah.
how wonderful the people, over average person in the United States is kind and generous, all right?
Yes.
And then I've driven a number of times around that area, but in 1996, when I was 65, going on 66.
Are you telling everybody how old you are?
Well,
If they know how to count.
if they know how to count, doesn't matter. But what happens, I had always wanted to bike across the United States, and I decided to take some time away from my practice. I closed down my practice, and I went out to California, flew out to California, and I biked across the United States at that time, 45 days, which was a seminal experience and great. But I saw so much of the United States and talked to so many people as you go along. I mean, and so what happened is I'd tell these stories to my wife, and she's never been to that area. I mean, she's seen a little bit, but not much.
You know, I've never been either.
Oh, every American should see Grand Canyon. They should see the Grand
I just
Canyon.
happened to see Grand
I mean,
Canyon.
it's this
Yeah.
this slash in the terra firma. All right, I mean, cut
Right.
through where the Colorado runs through.
Yes.
Depending on which rim you're in, it's 5,000 feet deep on one side and 6,000 feet deep on the north rim, and it's absolutely beautiful.
And it's like
But anyway,
Arizona and
so
Nevada.
I talked about it. I had biked down and I climbed down it, and I had burrowed down that, and so she had heard these stories, and I said, well, you know, I said about a month and a half ago, let's do it. Let's go and see it. So I did arrange that, and we flew out to Phoenix and got a car and drove to Sedona. Now, Sedona is the place where the red rocks are, and there are these wonderful, beautiful concretions of rock in red
And it's still
copper. It's beautiful. I mean,
is that
just
in
exquisite.
Arizona?
It's in Arizona.
Yeah.
Right. The name in Sedona was named after a guy, I think his name was Schweitzer or something like that. He named it after his wife. Her name was Sedona, and he named it after her. And then from there, we went through the canyons, and I went up to a town, because I couldn't get a reservation anywhere near the Grand Canyon, but we went to a town called Williams that I had biked through, and Route 66 goes through Williams. And it's this really lovely town. It's a real Western town, and it's got a lot of vibrancy to it. And they have a railroad, spur, an old Santa Fe railroad that runs
Wow.
from Williams to the Grand
It's
Canyon.
still running.
Grand Canyon. And it's now taken over by a big consortium that runs all the hotels and the other concessions at the parks in general, called Cantera. All right, and
Is that the original railroad that's still running?
It
or
was
is
the
it,
original spur. About 25 years ago, it was bought by two people in Phoenix, and they ran it for 25 years, and then they sold it to this Cantera. And it takes, it goes very slowly, all right, and it's just lovely. You go through that area, and it takes about 2 hours or so to get to the Grand Canyon, to the South Rim, and then you get off, and you have 4 hours there. They turn the train around, and it comes back to Williams.
that
all right?
must be fascinating.
And Roseanne had the chance to see the Grand Canyon. And then from there, we went to a place called Arizona, which is they've established a little park near Williams, whereby they have little enclaves of various animals. They have bison, wolves, bear, burros, deer, fox, all kinds of things.
It's like a little zoo.
It's like a zoo, but you drive through. And there are cattle grates in between that prevent the animals from going to one area to the other. So you drive through and you see bear and you see all these. It's beautiful and it's very tastefully done. And then they have an area, when you get through with that, there's an area where you get out of the car and you go to an area where they have little enclaves where they have the baby animals. They have bears and raccoons and all kinds of animals there. And then they have a wonderful raptor show. And I love raptors, owls and hawks and eagles and kites, and they have those, and that's there. And then we did that the next day. And then we took off and we drove up to Zion, which is to me, is the most beautiful of all the parks. It really is. It's absolutely magnificent, and it's so well run. And it has a shuttle, because Roseanne can't walk that well that much. So we take the bus around, it stops, and every 5 minutes there's another bus. And they just go around the park, and you're looking up at these peaks that are just sculptural masterpieces, just unbelievable. So we stayed there, and in Springdale, which is there, we met Roseanne's cousin, who is a woman who's done all of these parks. I mean, she's a really interesting woman.
What do you mean she's done?
She's hiked all of the major parks. She's a rock climber. She does all these things. She's still doing it.
She traveled through it like you.
and she loves it. So we met her for a couple of times, and it was great to see her. I love her. And then from there, we took off and traveled up through Utah, up into Nevada, and then we drove across Utah. Now Utah is flat and beautiful, but the mountains are there.
Yes.
And you're steadily at 4,000 feet. And we stayed, couldn't make it all across, so I had booked into a town called Eureka. And Eureka is like a town, if you remember the movie The Last Picture Show, there was a movie Bogdanovich made a play.
Yeah.
It was a wonderful movie, got a lot of reviews, good reviews. And it was about a small, almost dying town, about what it's like in the West. And it was somewhat sad, because it was a town that one time had been a mining town and
it was flourishing at one time.
And it was not. It was a town that was dying, and it was kind of sad to go through it. All right. So anyway, we stayed there overnight.
And you went to Nevada?
In Nevada.
Did you go to Las
Well, there's
Vegas?
a lot of unemployment in Nevada. The unemployment is somewhere around 17% in Nevada. It really is bad. So we drove there, and and every mile is a picture postcard. You stop along the way.
And they have a lot of red rocks. I've been to Las Vegas.
Right, and
that's a valley, actually.
Well, yeah, Las Vegas is kind of, because it's been built up, but in that area it's beautiful.
Yes.
It's lovely, and of course,
but there are
this is the same
mountains
thing.
all around it.
Right, and this is the same thing. You see the mountains in the distance, and the canyons, and it's, as I said, a picture postcard every moment.
Yes.
So we drove across, and we went to Las Vegas, not to Las Vegas, to Lake Tahoe. We stayed too high, which is this beautiful lake, and we stayed there, had a wonderful time. And then we came down California State 395, and we wanted to go to Yosemite. So we came to a place called Mun Lake, which is this beautiful lake, which is a volcanic lake. There are no fish in it because it's got 3 times the salinity of any normal, of the, say, the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah.
So no fish can, they have brine shrimp, that's about all that can exist in this little lake. But there are little bits of the volcanic mass, islands which are rising out of the lake, which are just beautiful. So I was there, and they had a little, nice little visitors area, and they had basically a short film there. And I came out, and Roseanne wanted to buy some things for our grandchildren. And I'm talking to one of the rangers, and I said, well, tomorrow I'm going to go see Yosemite. He said, I don't think so. I said, well, you don't think so. He said, there's an Arctic storm coming. I said, well, we're not prepared. It's been, you know, it's like 102 in Phoenix when we landed. It's been 80-something all along. I said, an Arctic storm? He said, yeah. He said, we're going to get a snowstorm. So anyway, quickly we went to a place. We couldn't get close to Yosemite. Again, I couldn't book close to it. I booked in a place called Mammoth Lakes, which is about 20 miles from Yosemite. We pulled into our little motel, and bread and breakfast. Next morning I got up, my car was buried in snow.
Oh my God.
So, you know, I had to borrow a shovel and, you know, so we had to dig our way out and dug our way out. And then we headed down, got out of there, and about 30 miles past there it was changed to rain. So it was okay. Then we started and had lunch and things. And we ended up in a place called Ridgecrest, which is in California, and which is close to where NASA was at one time. It's not too far from Edwards Air Force Base, and a large naval establishment called China Lakes, which is there, which are people from all over the world come to train in that area. And we stayed in this lovely little hotel, and we had a great time. And we sort of wandered down to Death Valley, looked at Death Valley a little bit, you know, not too much because it was that. And then at that point, we were ending near our career because I'd already gone almost 2,000 miles in travel at that time. And the last day we had planned to see, there's a man who I interned with when many years at Twins General Hospital. And he and his wife and I, and now Roseanne, they're like our sister and brother. I mean, we are that close. And he has traveled all over the country. He's like a Bedouin, he's traveled. And he finally ended up in Ojai, California. And he's a world-renowned child shrink, all right? And he has a grandparenting foundation. He's just this wonderful man that if you're in your room with him, you just feel good. He's one of those people that you just sit there and like if you're talking to me, you would feel good just by him talking to you. So anyway, we saw them, we had that wonderful thing. And then we decided to leave them because I didn't want to drive at night. And we dropped the car off at LAX, got into the plane, had this wonderful flight back, and here we are. But I wanted to talk about the fact that one of the things that's really noticeable in the bike trip, in my original trip, and in this trip, the people of the United States are kind, they are forgiving, they are generous, they are polite.
And hospitable.
And hospitable. It is amazing.
It's not like in the major cities.
It's amazing how it is. I mean, you just go there. I mean, I know on my bike ride, people came out of their houses to offer them water, drink, anything I mean, like that. Because the stories that were there, as I said,
so
while I'm biking, it was every single day was.
When you did the bike trip, you said you took some time off from your dental practice and you came back. And when you were treating your patients, and they were sitting in your chair and they couldn't talk. You were telling them about these stories because they couldn't talk back to you.
They were trapped they were a trapped audience.
I can imagine.
They were. Well, the man that I originally had a practice with, a man named David Davidson, who was a lovely, lovely man, and who died when we first came together. What happened? I had been an oral surgeon in New York, and he was one of my people that used to refer patients to me. And we became friends, and that's how we came out here. And he said to me, no man in my family has ever lived beyond 65.
Really?
And he died at 61. He was absolutely right. He had that.
So Howard, you said you had your practice for many years. Where were you born?
I was born basically in Beth Israel Hospital in Newark. My mother was
In Jersey?
In Jersey. My mother was a nurse, and she trained in that hospital. She was the only Irish nurse in that hospital.
Yeah.
And her nickname was Pat because she was Irish. All right, my mother's maiden name was O'Meara. So I'm a mixture of supposedly there's maybe a couple of Muslim people in my background, but basically my father was Jewish and my mother was Catholic.
Irish.
And Irish. And so,
Oh.
yeah. And that's probably where I got my need to talk all the time.
Well, both Jews and Irish, they both like to talk.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
Yentas.
some others too. And how did you get to the Hamptons?
Well, what happened, it was, well, it's a long story, but anyway, I practiced in Manhattan, and I had a practice there. And what happens is, New York at that time became dangerous. It really was. There wasn't as much police control. Things were, so I really didn't want to raise. I was having 2 kids. I didn't want to raise them in New York. So I decided we're going to try and move out of town. So we moved up to a place called South Salem. We had a house there, beautiful house, built it. It was on acres of land.
Where is South Salem?
South Salem is in Westchester.
So you went
upper
the
part of
opposite
Westchester.
direction.
Right. And so I was commuting back to the city all the time to my practice. And it was driving me nuts. I was just wearing myself up. I had to get up early in the morning, come back at night. And one time, I got up early in the morning, got on the train, it broke down.
The train broke
Train broke down. And then I finally got to my practice, which is an emergency practice mainly. I got through with all the patients, called Roseanne at 8 o'clock at night. I said, I'm coming home. Got on the train, it broke down again.
Oh, what was it, the Metro?
No, it was a Grand Central. It was a Grand Central, all right? And at that point, I was a raging lunatic. I said, that's it. I said, because at that time, David, who was referred to me, was saying, I'm moving out to the Hamptons. You know, you and I get along very well. Why don't we open a practice together? I said, I don't know if I want to do that because, you know, I think maybe it would be a big economic hit. But at that point, I said, David has offered this. We're going to go there, all right? And Roseanne came out, and it was about 3 months of crying and a lot of
course, you had to leave the old neighborhood.
Right. I mean, we had this beautiful house.
So where you are now, is that where you moved to?
Moved and we settled in Springs.
So where you live now?
I live in Springs, beautiful Springs.
Springs, yeah. And you mentioned you have 2 boys?
2
2 children.
2 children, a boy and a girl. The boy is older and the girl is...
And where are they?
Well, David is, and they're both unusual kids, and they both are very interesting. David is in New York City, and he's married to a woman who's Donna Karen's assistant, or her, you know, her I don't know what you would call her.
Oh, Donna Karen, she was at Ellen's Run party,
Right,
I remember, yeah.
And she's a lovely lady, and they live in New York City. And Jesse, my youngest, is married to a wonderful man, Steve Kennedy, whose family settled in this town. In fact, the family is involved with restaurants. We're involved in a restaurant in this town.
A restaurant?
Right, in this town.
So she lives out here?
So he lives here, and I've got my 3 grandchildren within 7 miles away.
Oh, that's good.
And they're all wonderful. I mean, each and every one has a different characteristic. You know, they're all great.
So you don't have to go far away. Actually, New York City is not that far away. You could spend time with them.
You could, but it's easier and better probably, you know, to be here. You know, we can babysit because we can be used for being babysitters.
Of course. What else?
That's what grandparents are for. And to spoil your child, grandchildren.
So now you're retired. You're not a doctor and not a dentist anymore. So you spend time with Ellen's Run.
Ellen's Run. I'm on the board of the library. I'm on the board of the rec center.
Center Library, you're a board of? I didn't know that.
Sure, I'm on the board of the library.
See, I'm finding out all these things. You kept a secret.
I'm on the board of a wonderful foundation, the Kendall Madison Foundation.
Madison?
Kendall Madison, yes.
What's that?
Well, he was a wonderful young man that grew up in this town. He was an athlete. He got a scholarship to the University of Connecticut. And he was an exemplar to any black young man, in this, Afro-American young man in this town. Came back, and he was involved. There was the night he came back, and they were trying to break up a fight in one of the clubs here, and he got stabbed.
Oh.
And somehow or other, out of the hospital, he threw a clot, and he died.
Oh, he died.
And the funeral, which was at one of the major churches in town, the receiving line extended out the church door, around, all the way out through the village, down past Plitt Ford, and all past the post office. That's how long it was, and how much respect they had for him. And his mother, Sharon Bacon, is this wonderful woman who has been a friend a long time.
I know Sharon Bacon.
Sure, see her at Ellen's Run. She helps out there.
Yeah, and she works at the Y.
Yeah, and
that's her son.
Right.
I didn't know that.
And so the foundation was established, and basically the scholarship is to every year I get the resumes of these wonderful children from the East Hampton High School. I mean, I'm constantly amazed at how talented they are. They have to be athletes, and they have to be scholars.
It was such a wonderful, I had such a wonderful time here. I learned so much about you that I didn't know before.
Good.
And I'm sure we could have another half-hour show. And
Someday,
the rest of the
let's do it in 2012.
Yeah, yes. And because you are an extremely interesting person. See, I only knew about you that are secret meetings at the supermarkets and Ellen's Run.
We gave the code word, the secret word, all right, and the sacred handshake.
Yeah.
All right. Good.
So it's been great. I learned a lot about you, and I'm so glad you came out in this rain. And I reminisced about Las Vegas. I loved Las Vegas, and I lived there like for 2 years at one time.
Oh, yeah.
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 And I love historic places. Right?
Well, it's an interesting place because of the ecology of the place. I mean, they prevent people from having lawns. They promote succulents. I mean, actually, people are penalized for using water on their lawns. So so it's an interesting place because of the fact that water is so precious. I mean, that's another story. I mean, we were talking to Debbie outside.
Oh, she's a great one for that.
Well, we were talking about the fact that, and I pointed out, there's a book called The Big Thirst, and it's about the fact that when the world was created, we were given